The 10 most epic battles in Japanese history. Picture this. A fleet of 4,400 ships stretches across the horizon, carrying 140,000 of the most feared warriors in history, the Mongol army. Their mission? To conquer an island nation that dared to defy the mighty Kublai Khan. The year is 1281, and Japan faces its greatest external threat ever. This is the story of how fate, courage, and what many called divine wind would change the course of history forever. Welcome to our countdown of the 10 most epic battles in Japanese history. Conflicts that shaped not just Japan, but the entire course of Asian civilization. These aren't just tales of samurai and swords. They're stories of innovation, desperation, and strategic genius that would make Sun Tzu proud. Let's start with number 10. The Battle of Baekgang River in 663 CE. Imagine the stakes. Japan's first and only major military intervention on the Korean peninsula. The Tang Chinese dynasty had just unified China and set its sights on Korea. Japan, allied with the Korean kingdom of Baekje, couldn't afford to let China dominate the peninsula. Think of it as Japan's Vietnam moment, but 2,300 years earlier. The battle was a catastrophe for Japan. Their fleet of 800 ships met the mighty Tang Silla alliance in the Baekgang River. The Japanese commanders made a fatal mistake. They anchored their ships in a narrow strait, creating a perfect target. The Tang fleet, led by the brilliant strategist Liu Rengui, unleashed a devastating attack. Using fire arrows and maritime tactics that would make modern naval commanders nod in appreciation, they transformed the strait into an inferno. The defeat was so decisive that it fundamentally altered Japan's foreign policy for centuries. Imagine if the United States had lost the Spanish-American War so badly that it never intervened in Latin America again. That's how profound this impact was. Number 9 brings us to the Jinshin War of 672. Think of it as Japan's Game of Thrones moment. Prince Owama and Prince Otomo, two brothers, clashed in a succession dispute that would determine Japan's future. But this wasn't just about who would sit on the throne. It was about the very nature of Japanese government. Prince Owama, despite being the younger brother, proved himself a military genius. In a series of brilliant maneuvers that would have made Stonewall Jackson proud, he outflanked his brother's forces in the mountains of central Japan. His troops moved with such speed and precision that they earned the nickname the Ghost Army. The prince personally led cavalry charges, breaking enemy formations with tactical innovations that would influence Japanese warfare for centuries. The war culminated in a decisive battle near modern-day Mino province, where Owama's forces executed a perfect pincer movement. This wasn't just a victory, it was a revolution in Japanese military tactics. Owama's triumph established the supremacy of mobile warfare over static defense, a lesson that wouldn't be forgotten for a millennium. For number 8, we fast forward to one of the most dramatic rebellions in Japanese history, the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877. Imagine if Robert E. Lee had lived to lead another rebellion after the Civil War. That's essentially what happened here. The legendary Saigo Takamori, known as the Last Samurai, led a desperate uprising against the modernizing Meiji government. This wasn't just any rebellion. It was the last stand of the samurai way of life against the modern world. Picture this: samurai warriors with traditional swords charging against soldiers armed with Gatling guns and modern artillery. The rebellion culminated in the Battle of Shiroyama, where 500 samurai faced off against 30,000 imperial troops. In what can only be described as Japan's Alamo moment, Saigo's samurai made their last charge on September 24, 1877. As dawn broke over Kagoshima, these warriors, armed primarily with swords, charged down the slopes of Mount Shiroyama against a modern army. The imperial forces, despite their overwhelming technological superiority, were so impressed by their opponent's bravery that many wept as they fired their weapons. The battle ended just as the sun rose, with Saigo committing ritual suicide after being wounded. His death marked the end of an era, but the spirit of Bushido, the way of the warrior that he embodied, would continue to influence Japanese culture for generations to come. To understand the impact of these battles is to understand Japan itself. Each conflict we've discussed represents not just a military engagement, but a crucial turning point in Japanese history. As we continue our countdown, you'll see how these moments of crisis forged the nation that would eventually become one of the world's great powers. Moving to number 7 on our countdown, we arrive at one of the most innovative sieges in military history, the Ishiyama-Honganji War. Imagine a medieval siege lasting longer than the entire American Civil War. That's exactly what happened when Oda Nobunaga, Japan's first great unifier, confronted the militant Buddhist fortress of Ishiyama-Honganji in 1570. This wasn't just any fortress. It was a massive complex that combined the defensive capabilities of Europe's greatest castles with the religious fervor of a crusader stronghold. For 10 years, Nobunaga employed every military innovation he could think of: naval blockades, sustained artillery bombardment, and even primitive flamethrowers. Think of it as Japan's version of the siege of Vicksburg, but lasting 10 times longer. The most fascinating aspect? The defenders used underground tunnels and sophisticated supply networks that would impress modern military planners. They even developed underwater diving suits made of leather to smuggle supplies past Nobunaga's blockade. Medieval SEAL teams, if you will. For number 6, we witness perhaps the most cinematic battle in Japanese history, the Battle of Kawanakajima in 1561. Two of Japan's greatest generals, Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin, faced off in what would become the stuff of legend. These men were like the Patton and Rommel of their day, each commanding loyal armies and employing sophisticated tactics that military historians still study. The battle reached its climax when Uesugi Kenshin, leading his cavalry, crashed through Takeda's lines and personally confronted Shingen at his command post. Picture this: Kenshin, sword drawn, charging directly at Shingen, who had only a war fan to defend himself. In what would become one of the most famous duels in samurai history, Shingen parried Kenshin's sword strikes with his iron fan until his guards could respond. This wasn't just combat, it was poetry in motion. Number 5 takes us to the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, where medieval warfare met the gunpowder revolution. Oda Nobunaga, facing the fearsome Takeda cavalry, think of them as the Japanese equivalent of Mongol horse archers, deployed 3,000 arquebusiers, matchlock gunners, in a rotating 3-line formation. This revolutionary tactic allowed for continuous fire, creating what was essentially a 16th century version of machine gun nests. The battle began in rain, normally a disaster for gunpowder weapons. But Nobunaga had prepared for this, using oil paper umbrellas to keep his gunners powder dry. When the proud Takeda cavalry charged, they faced something unprecedented: disciplined volleys of gunfire that turned the battlefield into a killing zone. This wasn't just a battle, it was the moment Japanese warfare entered the modern age. In our 4th spot, we have the Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185, a naval engagement that would make Captain Horatio Nelson proud. This wasn't just a battle, it was the finale of Japan's first great civil war, fought between the Minamoto and Taira clans. The stage, the narrow Shimonoseki Strait, where over 1,000 ships gathered for the final showdown. The Taira clan, once the mightiest in Japan, had been pushed to the edge of the country. They took their young emperor and Toku, just 8 years old, onto their ships, believing the Minamoto wouldn't dare attack the sacred sovereign. They were wrong. The battle began with archery duels between ships, but the tide turned when the Taira's allies switched sides mid-battle. What followed was chaos on an epic scale. As their position became hopeless, and Toku's grandmother, the nun of second rank, took the young emperor in her arms and jumped into the sea rather than face capture. With her went the sacred imperial sword, one of Japan's 3 imperial regalia. The sea ran red with the blood of nobles and warriors, while valuable artifacts and treasures sank into the depths. This battle didn't just end a war. It changed Japan forever. The Minamoto victory established the first shogunate, beginning Japan's long era of warrior governance. The battle site remains a haunted place in Japanese folklore, where locals say the ghosts of Taira warriors still walk on stormy nights, and fishermen claim to pull up ancient samurai artifacts in their nets. Each of these battles represents a crucial turning point in Japanese history, moments where the future hung by a thread. But as we move to our top 3, we'll see conflicts that didn't just change Japan, they altered the course of world history itself. We've arrived at our top 3 battles. Conflicts so momentous they didn't just change Japan, they shaped the destiny of all East Asia. Coming in at number 3 is the Siege of Osaka, the epic final clash between the Tokugawa and Toyotomi clans in 1614-1615. Imagine if the American Civil War had ended not at Appomattox, but with one final apocalyptic battle that would determine the nation's fate for the next 250 years. The siege centered on Osaka Castle, the most formidable fortress ever built in Japan. The young Toyotomi Hideyori, heir to Japan's previous ruler, held out against Tokugawa Ieyasu's massive army of 200,000 men. The castle's defenses were so impressive that they would have made the builders of Europe's greatest fortresses jealous. 3 moats, walls made of enormous stone blocks, and enough supplies to last years. The winter campaign of 1614 became a testament to human endurance. As snow fell on the battlefield, Tokugawa's forces attempted to fill the moats, while defenders rained down arrows, bullets, and burning oil. The castle's defenders, including the legendary warrior monk Sanada Yukimura, fought with such ferocity that even their enemies composed poems about their courage. But it was the summer campaign of 1615 that would decide everything. In a brutal final battle, Sanada led a desperate counterattack that nearly reached Tokugawa himself. The fighting was so intense that samurai described the battlefield as hell on earth, with the summer heat adding to the horror as tens of thousands clashed in close combat. The fall of Osaka Castle marked the true beginning of the Tokugawa shogunate, ushering in 250 years of peace through absolute control. Our second-place battle brings us to what many consider Japan's Gettysburg, the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. On a foggy morning in October, 160,000 warriors gathered on a narrow plain to determine Japan's future. The eastern army of Tokugawa Ieyasu faced the western army of Ishida Mitsunari in what would become the largest samurai battle in history. This wasn't just a military encounter, it was a complex web of loyalty, betrayal, and political maneuvering that would make Machiavelli take notes. The battle hung on a knife's edge until the crucial defection of several key Western Army commanders. In a moment that changed Japanese history forever, Kobayakawa Hideaki, positioned on Mount Matsuo, charged down not against Tokugawa's forces as expected, but into the flank of his own allies. The battle transformed into a slaughter as more units switched sides, demonstrating that even in samurai warfare, loyalty often followed opportunity. By the end of the day, 40,000 warriors lay dead, and the path to the Tokugawa shogunate was secured. The battle site today still yields artifacts, as if the earth itself can't forget the magnitude of what happened there. And now we arrive at our number 1 spot, the Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281. This wasn't just a battle. It was the moment that earned Japan its reputation as the invincible nation. When Kublai Khan, ruler of the largest empire in human history, demanded Japan's submission, the Japanese sent back a reply that would make the Spartans proud: absolute refusal. The first invasion in 1274 saw 900 ships and 40,000 troops landing on Japanese shores. The Mongols brought weapons the Japanese had never seen: explosive bombs, coordinated cavalry tactics, and crossbows that could penetrate samurai armor. The Japanese defenders fought desperately, but it was nature itself that intervened. A massive typhoon destroyed much of the Mongol fleet, forcing a retreat. But it was the second invasion of 1281 that would become legendary. Kublai Khan sent the largest seaborne invasion force the world would see until D-Day, 400 ships carrying 140,000 warriors. For 2 months, the Japanese fought a desperate defensive campaign, their samurai learning to adapt to the Mongols' superior weapons and tactics. Then came what the Japanese would call kamikaze, the divine wind. A massive typhoon struck the Mongol fleet, sinking most of their ships and drowning most of their army. The invasion force that had seemed unstoppable was virtually annihilated. This miraculous salvation helped cement the Japanese belief in their nation's divine protection and unique destiny. The impact of these battles extends far beyond Japan. Had the Mongols succeeded, they might have used Japan as a springboard to attack Korea's rear and possibly even threaten Southeast Asia. The Tokugawa victory at Sekigahara led to 2.5 centuries of isolation that preserved Japanese culture in unique ways. And the siege of Osaka Castle established a system of political control that would influence Japan until the modern era. These weren't just military encounters, they were moments that shaped civilization itself. They remind us that history isn't just about dates and facts, it's about human courage, innovation, and the eternal struggle to shape destiny. From the samurai charging into gunfire at Nagashino to the defenders of Osaka Castle fighting to the last, these battles tell us something profound about the human spirit and its capacity for both destruction and glory. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Japan's most epic battles. If you've enjoyed this exploration of history, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Your support helps us continue bringing these fascinating stories to life. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll dive deep into another captivating aspect of Japanese history.